So I've got a nice piece of heavy duty cartridge paper taped up, and in fact I've taped it so I can do two paintings on the same page. I quite like working on two at once. I've got my tear off paper palette to work on. I like a nice hard flat surface to mix my colours on, and I'm starting with some Wallace Seymour colours. So I've got my favourite Prussian blue, a palest blue which is fantastic for the sky, and a bit of turquoise, a sky blue, and I shall also be using some Jackson's white. So I will just start by squirting a little bit of that out and getting a bit off the, I think let's start with the palest blue. So get a bit of that out on my palette. Possibly I might add in, I've just got this new colour which I've not played with very much yet. It's an unbleached titanium by Liquitex, so it's a slightly warmer white. Not quite a buff titanium, but rather a gorgeous sort of creamy colour. So I'm just going to start by putting some of this pale blue in the sky, and it beautiful high pigment, the Wallace Seymour, so they spread and cover very well. I would probably put it down roughly, pick up a bit of white on my fingers and just work that in. So I'm thinking of a nice spring sky, so I want a fairly crisp blue. I might add some clouds later, but for the moment I'm wanting something fairly smooth. The other tool that I often use is I do like to just scrape and just build that up. And you can see I'm actually getting a few bits of white appearing there already. So that's how I would start my sky. I've always got a paper towel to hand, as I do tend to get quite messy. Probably next I'd go in, and let's just do a nice bit of Prussian blue. My favourite colour for the sea is always a Prussian blue. And I very often use these little brushes that I get from IKEA. They're just quite a nice size for just one sweep across to do the sea. So literally putting it straight in, get my brush and just drag it across. And I can tidy up make it straight later on. That's not too bad for first pass. Maybe just bring a little bit of that down to go underneath things, and maybe a bit of the blue might come down onto the beach as well. So just a very, very simple beginning here. I would then like to get some beach in. I've just noticed that's got quite a slant, I see, but I can tilt my paper a little bit when I finished it, so I'm not worried really at this stage about whether it's straight or not. So I'm just going to pick up on my scraper some of this rather lovely, what was it called? Unbleached titanium, the Liquitex paint. I tend to try, when I'm using acrylics, to use certainly always an artist quality, but I do like a rich sort of high pigment paint. I think you get what you pay for, and a little does tend to go a long way if you're going for a slightly higher quality paint. So although sometimes it seems like quite a big investment, I think you probably balance out in the end. So I'm just trying to get some feeling of the sort of reflections on the beach here, scraping it in gently. This is a lovely paper to work on. I'm not worried about things where it goes. Oh, that's, you see, quite interesting there. Fingers are brilliant for just pulling things together. A few bits of rocky bits here, which I'm quite liking. These are probably my go-to tools, fingers and squeegees. Palette knives as well, and a bit of brushwork sometimes. But I like the randomness of something like this. So it's picking up the colours underneath, it's picking up bits of colours that are still on it. So there's bits of blue coming through there. So it's very, very easy, I think, in this manner to build up what I call the bones of the painting, the beginning of the painting. And I I would probably work like this, do several like this, let them dry and then work back into them. Because already I'm thinking that C is a bit too heavy. So I'm just going to possibly scrape that down a bit. And I might work into that lot of blue paint on my brush, but let's take some of that off. Feels a bit heavy with the sky, given that I'm into these sort of more spring type moods. So just dragging it sort of fairly roughly across and letting it sort of do its own thing. And again, anything that I do at the moment can be easily changed later. I'm not fixed in anything at the moment. Already there's some things that I'm quite liking sort of beginning to happen on this one. I shall probably make some of this into some rocks later on. And because the paint is quite thick, you know, I've always got this ability to scrape into it, to draw into it, should I decide to. So I quite like that. So very much sort of building up that feeling of the beach at low tide. So while that one's drying, I'm just going to turn my paper around and start on the one on the other side. And I think I will probably, I'm loving this pale blue. This is this palest blue by Wallace Seymour. As I say, they are beautiful, beautiful paints. So see how far that little bit goes. And I will probably make the sky, give the sky a bit more detail, a bit more cloud later, but I'm thinking at the moment, the sky has been this fabulous, just clear blue recently. So I'm quite keen to just keep that, and I shall then build up lots of texture in the beach. I don't like too much texture in the sky and the beach at the same time. I think one or the other is probably better, but not too much going on in both. So I might actually on this, rather than go with the Prussian blue, let's have a look at something. Let's add a little bit of grey and have a little bit of headland. So just playing around, varying what I'm doing a bit. So just thinking about, there's probably too much paint on there, gone a bit heavy, so let's just scrape that in. Yeah, that's looking okay. Probably bring a bit more of the blue in here. Not quite sure what colour we're going to do for the sea here. I'm very much somebody who plays, so I'll get started, see what's happening, see what I like, and almost sort of take it from there. So I'm actually not thinking I'm going to go with the Prussian on this one. And in fact, on the first one, I might very well work over some of that Prussian blue because it's feeling a little heavy, although it's my go-to winter colour. It's feeling a bit heavy at the moment. Just let that sky dry a little bit before I put any cloud on. So while things are just drying there, I'm just going to come down the page and just again start with some of these beachier colours. And again, you know, look at this Liquitex paint. So this is one of their heavy body ones. So it's got a lot of substance to it. I mean, some people, you know, people work differently. People like different types of paint for different reasons. But if I'm working on paper, I like to have, even if I'm working on canvas or board, I like to have a good covering power. So I'm quite keen on seeing how this is going. I might actually put some pink in this. I'm quite into the pinks at the moment with this lovely spring light. Rather more blue probably than I meant to put in there. So try not to overthink it, trying to just put it on, see what happens, knowing that this is just a first coat. and that I'm going to work back into it. I like to have the edges taped because sometimes you sort of feel that you don't want to work right to the edges otherwise. But this way I can feel I can work onto and over the tape, and then when I take it off, I've got a nice clearly defined edge. I'm not sure that I like this blue at the bottom. Let's just get a little more white out. And maybe come in with the palette knife and the white down the bottom here, cover it over. And depending on how thick it is and how dry the layers are underneath, as to what that does, but that's got some quite interesting stuff sort of going on here. Not sure about that. Let's just blend that out. So working quite hard there with the palette knife, and possibly bringing a bit of this blue that's just reflecting on the wet sand. I've usually got several brushes, several palette knives on the go, just to be able to not have to sort of clean up too much between. I'm liking the angle of the sea here, so I think that's quite interesting. I'm also going in fairly thickly here, with possibly, yes. It's addictive actually. You sort of get started, and before you know it, you're sort of not quite sure where you're going really. Now, that was a mistake. I liked that before I did that, so let's see whether or not we can work back over that. That really needs a bit more of the blue over it. That's better. I was losing this rather nice angle that I'd got here that I liked. Which I think possibly needs just to go. And I think, you know, working on paper at this scale as well, I always think takes the pressure off, because if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. And you can just go back and reuse it, throw it away, you know, it's whereas if you're working on large canvas, there's always a sense that you've got to do something a little bit more special because it's cost you so much to buy it. That already is beginning to look quite nice, and I'm actually liking my second one much more than my first one, which is very often the way. You actually need to have several on the go and just be moving between them and almost sort of learning from one what works and what you like and what you don't like, in order to sort of move forward. So just quite like some of this, what's happening in the sky here, just a bit of gentle cloud. So although I had thought I might put a bit of pink in, I'm not so sure, because actually it's beginning to look quite interesting, this one. I think it needs possibly some black down the bottom somewhere to balance this, so that's quite heavy. I'm just going to soften that a little bit. And I'm feeling that I might want to bring something in down here to balance the black, but whether I wait and do that when it's dry or you know, let's just try a few sort of rocky bits. Again, putting it in roughly and smearing with the fingers. So it's more a sort of suggestion really. Fingers are great tools, aren't they? What were they made for other than painting? Nope, didn't like that, but it was better before. So I might put some charcoal on that when it's dry. It feels like it needs a little bit more going on, but at the moment that's looking quite interesting.